So, Dave, tell us, why is Immanuel Kant important to the field of philosophy?
Immanuel Kant is impactful for one reason, and he's influential for another. He's influential because every philosopher after him has had to reference him. But that's because of the impact that he had. The reason that he was so impactful was because ever since the time of Descartes, there had been this debate over empiricism versus rationalism. Rationalism basically believes that, like with geometry, you should be able to work out the fundamental problems of human existence and come to true knowledge from a study. Whereas the empiricists believe you have to actually go out and you have to study nature. This is a sort of version of the difference between how Plato and Aristotle are understood, where Plato he believes that what we have here is a sad diminution or watered down version of actual reality, which is this sort of abstract, ideal, transcendent world of forms. And Aristotle believed, no, you actually have to get out there. And there's a lot more to it, and there's a lot more ways that these guys can be interpreted. But for now, we're just giving these broad stroke, this is what people say, kind of interpretation, the 101 introduction to these thinkers. So Kant breaks he takes these two sides, rationalism versus empiricism, where we have people like Descartes versus John Locke, and then Hume, right? And he comes along and instead of being within that debate, he says, what are the conditions of possibility for that debate to even occur? This is why he develops a kind of critique that's going to be very important for the rest of the Germans and then everybody that comes after them, really, which is a sort of immanent critique, which is to say you try to understand the conditions of possibility for the disagreement itself. What makes it possible for a human to perceive this dilemma in the first place? And so for him, he develops this idea of the categories of the mind, and he very famously develops the idea of the distinction between the phenomenal world, the phenomenal things, and the noumenal world, those things in themselves that cannot be perceived without mediation through our sensory apparatuses. It's undeniably true that we have sensory apparatuses. The mind functions as a sort of filter to mediate reality to us. When you're born, when you grow up, you just kind of take for granted that reality is what you're perceiving. It is through Kant that you realize there's several stages of mediation and that there are categories in the mind that are filtering the data of existence. And so we cannot just take for granted that which is given to us. This was a huge moment in philosophy because his critique of pure reason establishes, it's really just like the most boss thing any philosopher's ever done, which was basically saying, I understand both sides of this argument better than anyone in it, and I'm going to show that both sides are presupposing all of this other stuff. And what he was hoping to do was to kind of build off of the idea that Descartes was doing, which was to say, to kind of show religion and the church on the one side and science and reason on the other side what their proper lanes are, what the parameters are within which they work. There's a realm within which science and reason are applicable, and there's a realm within which theology and the church has authority to speak on things. And so Kant is very important for creating this hard line where he says there are limits to what pure reason can do. And by establishing those limits, philosophers have been divided ever since. So that's why we always have to go back to Kant.